The Virani warships glided through the void, their crystalline hulls gleaming under distant starlight. Captain Zadner scratched his scaled neck, bored from another routine patrol along the border of human space. "Status report," he grumbled. "All systems normal, sir." Though ... Lieutenant Kyra tilted her head. "There's something odd about the background radiation." Zadner leaned forward. The humans were crafty. Everyone knew that. "Explain." "It's like static but not random, almost like..." The ship's lights flickered. Every screen went dark. "Report," Zadner barked, but his crew just stared at dead consoles. Even their backup systems were dead. Through the viewport, he watched in horror as the rest of his fleet drifted aimlessly, their engine signatures completely dark. 5 of the most advanced Virani ships, now floating like dead metal in space. "Emergency power," he ordered. Nothing. A soft hum filled the bridge. The kind of hum that made teeth rattle and scales itch. Zadner had never heard anything like it. "Sir," Kara pointed out the viewport. "Look." Something massive emerged from behind the system's gas giant. It was wrong. The shape didn't make sense. It hurt his eyes to look at it. With trembling claws, Zadner activated his personal emergency beacon, the only piece of equipment still working. "This is Captain Zadner of the Virani Defense Fleet. We are under attack by unknown forces near human territory. Our ships are disabled and..." The hum grew louder. His beacon crackled. "They're not what we thought. The humans they've built..." The beacon died with a sharp crack, leaving only silence and that maddening hum. As the darkness consumed his ship and the eerie hum intensified, Captain Zextal realized the horrifying truth. This was no mere human trick. Something far worse lurked in the void. But before he could send another warning, the silence swallowed him whole. High Counselor Vexna swept her crystalline robes aside as she settled into her seat in the grand chamber. The massive circular room hummed with worried whispers from the gathered representatives of the Galactic Council. "Order, please," she called out, her voice echoing. "We're here to discuss the Virani patrol's disappearance." Ambassador Krill, a towering insectoid, clicked his mandibles. 3 ships don't just vanish without cause. The humans dash. "Let's not jump to conclusions," interrupted Counselor Maztik, his blue scales shimmering under the chamber's lights. "Pirates have grown bold in that sector. Or perhaps it was one of those rogue AIs we've been tracking." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Vexna nodded slowly. It made sense. Pirates were always a problem, and malfunctioning AIs had caused trouble before. "The humans have been peaceful trading partners for decades," she said. "We shouldn't risk diplomatic tensions over speculation." The chamber doors burst open. A young aide rushed in, his scales pale with fear. "High Counselor, we've found something." The main display flickered to life, showing a massive debris field. Among the scattered wreckage floated the unmistakable form of a Trinton dreadnought, one of the most powerful warships in known space. Its kilometer-long hull had been split perfectly in 2, the edges smooth as glass. Silence fell over the chamber. The Trinton were renowned for their nearly impenetrable shields and armor. Nothing known could cut through them so cleanly. "Impossible," whispered Krill. That's the pride of Zarkul. It was reported missing last week." "How?" Vexna stared at the image, her heart's pounding. The cut was too perfect, too precise. This was no pirate attack. This was something else entirely. The council chamber erupted in panicked discussion. Whatever had done this was still out there, and no one knew what it was, or what it would target next. As the council chamber erupted into chaos over the discovery of the destroyed dreadnought, a priority transmission suddenly overrode their communications. The chamber fell silent as the image of a human officer flickered to life, his face betraying neither arrogance nor fear. High Counselor Vexna swept her crystalline robes aside as she settled into her seat in the grand chamber. The massive holographic display flickered to life, showing the wreckage of the Trenton dreadnought floating lifelessly in space. "This is beyond mere piracy," growled Ambassador Catil, his scaled hide rippling with anger. "No known weapon could slice through our strongest alloys like this." A sudden burst of static filled the chamber. The holographic display shifted, revealing a human in a crisp military uniform. His face was stern, but his voice remained steady. "Greetings, Council members. I am Admiral James Cooper of the Terran Defense Fleet. We are transmitting to inform you that your vessels entered restricted space despite multiple warnings. They opened fire on our patrol ships without provocation." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Vexana's inner membranes pulsed with irritation. "You dare claim self-defense after destroying a dreadnought?" she demanded. The Admiral's expression didn't change. "We have video evidence of the engagement. Your ships ignored 17 hails and launched fighters. We responded with appropriate force." "Appropriate?" scoffed Catil. "You cut through our strongest ship like it was nothing." "Our gravity lance technology is effective," Admiral Cooper stated simply. "We hope to avoid demonstrating it this way. I strongly advise against further incursions into human space." The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in uproar. Counselors shouted over each other, their various appendages gesturing wildly. "They threaten us?" roared Catil. "These primitives who barely left their planet a century ago?" Vexana raised her arms for silence. "They have grown too bold. This weapon of theirs poses a serious threat to galactic stability." "The humans have always been troublesome," chittered Counselor Zix. "Remember how they refused to submit to quarantine protocols? How they bypassed our trade restrictions? And now they destroy our ships," added another counselor. "They must be taught their place." Vexana nodded slowly. "All in favor of authorizing a punitive expedition?" The vote was nearly unanimous. Only 2 counselors abstained, both from species who had extensive trade deals with human worlds. "Then it is decided," Vexana declared. "We will assemble a fleet to remind these humans that they are but one small part of a vast galactic community. They will learn respect, or they will learn fear." The council chamber erupted in approving clicks, hums, and roars. Orders were already being transmitted to the various fleet commanders. The humans had overstepped, and now they would face the consequences of their arrogance. The council's decision was swift. Human defiance could not go unpunished. Even as the fleet assembled, Warlord Christie prepared his forces with unwavering confidence. He had crushed rebellions before, and he would crush this one just as easily, or so he believed. Warlord Christie stood tall on the bridge of his flagship, the Mountain Breaker. His massive frame, covered in battle-worn scales, cast an imposing shadow across the command deck. Around him, the finest Trenton warriors managed their stations with practiced efficiency. 15 ships, all battle-ready, his second-in-command reported. "The humans won't stand a chance against our might." Christie's mouth curled into what passed for a smile among his kind. The council was right to send us. These humans need to learn their place. The battle group dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the human-claimed system. Christie's yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the sensor readings. Empty space greeted them. No defense platforms, no patrol ships, nothing. "Curious," he muttered. "Move us in closer. Standard attack formation." The ships moved forward in perfect harmony, their massive engines pulsing with blue energy. Each vessel was a masterpiece of Trenton engineering, bristling with weapons and wrapped in the strongest armor in known space. "Sir," called out his sensor officer, "energy spike dead ahead." Before Christie could respond, space itself seemed to tear open. A brilliant white light flooded the viewport, forcing him to shield his eyes. When he looked again, 3 human ships had appeared from nowhere. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, sleek, dark shapes that seemed to drink in the starlight. No weapons were visible on their hulls, but something about them made Christie's scales itch. "Open communications," he ordered. "Let's give them one chance to—" The human ships moved. One moment they were there, the next they weren't. Christie's crew barely had time to shout warnings before the vessels reappeared, somehow behind their formation. "Impossible," Christie roared. "All ships, battle stations. Show these humans what real warriors." The rest of his words died in his throat as he watched two of his rear ships simply disappear. Not explode, not break apart. They were there 1 second, gone the next, leaving nothing but empty space behind. "What kind of weapons are these?" his weapons officer screamed. More human ships appeared, emerging from what looked like tears in space itself. They moved like dancers, flowing between the Trenton vessels with impossible grace. Christie's mighty battle group, pride of the Council fleet, lasted exactly 6 minutes and 23 seconds. In that time, he watched helplessly as ship after ship vanished, leaving no debris, no bodies, no trace they had ever existed. The last thing Christie saw was a human ship approaching his viewport. It was close enough that he could make out strange markings on its hull, symbols that seemed to shift and change as he watched them. Then everything went white, and the mighty warlord Christie, along with his entire battle group, ceased to exist. Back in Council space, the automated beacons registered 15 ships entering human territory. None of them ever returned. But there was no battle, no grand war cry of warriors meeting their foes. In mere moments, Christie's proud fleet was reduced to nothing. As the last echoes of destruction faded, the Council was left with only one option. They had to negotiate. Chancellor Varick sat in his private quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel, Voice of Reason, smoothing the wrinkles from his ceremonial robes. His long fingers traced the golden threads that marked his status as the Council's chief negotiator. The gesture, practiced thousands of times before, usually calmed his nerves. Today, it didn't help. "Computer, replay the last known transmission from Warlord Christie's fleet," he commanded. The holographic display flickered to life. "Moving into attack position. No sign of human vessels. Wait. Energy spike. Multiple signatures emerging from..." Static filled the screen. Varick's face tightened. In his 300 years of service, he'd never lost a fleet of this size. 15 warships gone without a trace. The Council chambers had erupted into chaos when the news arrived. "Chancellor," his aide's voice came through the intercom. "We're approaching the human claimed system." "Very well." Varick stood, straightening his spine. "I'll be on the bridge shortly." The bridge crew parted as he entered, their movement stiff with tension. The main viewport showed the vast emptiness of space, dotted with distant stars. "Status report," Varick demanded. "We're broadcasting peaceful intentions on all frequencies," the communications officer said. "No response yet." Varick clasped his hands behind his back. "Continue forward, slow and steady." Minutes stretched into hours. The silence grew heavier with each passing moment. Varick had negotiated with countless species, but humans were different. They didn't follow the usual patterns. They didn't react as expected. A sudden alarm pierced the quiet. "Energy signature," the sensor operator called out. "Massive ship dropping out of FTL." Varick's breath caught in his throat as the vessel appeared before them. It dwarfed his diplomatic ship, its hull gleaming under the distant starlight. The design was unlike anything he'd seen before, smooth lines mixed with angular sections, all flowing together in perfect harmony. "The TDS Invictus," the tactical officer whispered, fear evident in his voice. Varick stepped closer to the viewport, unable to tear his eyes away from the human warship. Its very presence seemed to bend space around it, a testament to technology that shouldn't be possible for such a young species. "Open a channel," he ordered, fighting to keep his voice steady. For the first time in his career, Chancellor Varick felt truly out of his depth. The Invictus hung there, silent and imposing, its weapon ports closed but visible, a clear message that peace was preferred, but war was always an option. As Chancellor Varick's diplomatic ship approached the human system, the silence was deafening. No war horns, no grand welcomes. Just a single ship, waiting, watching, a vessel that defied everything the Council thought it knew about human capabilities. Through the viewport of his ship, Chancellor Varric watched his escort fleet move into formation. 30 warships, including 5 Trenton battleships, spread out in a classic display of military might. A show of force that had made countless species bow before the Council. "Status report," he commanded, his voice steady despite the unease churning in his stomach. "The human vessel remains stationary, Chancellor," his aide reported. "They've made no aggressive moves." Varric studied the TDS Invictus. The human ship looked wrong. Its hull was too smooth, lacking the expected weapon ports and defense turrets. It was smaller than his flagship, yet something about its presence made his scales itch. "Send the standard greeting. Remind them of Council authority." Varric straightened his robes. "Position our fleet for maximum visual impact." The Trenton battleships, each nearly 2 miles long, moved to form a wall of gleaming metal. Their gunports opened, revealing rows of energy cannons. Behind them, lighter vessels took up screening positions. "Message sent, Chancellor. No response from the humans." Varric frowned. "Move us closer. Let them see." "Sir," his tactical officer's voice cracked. "The human ship, it's doing something." A soft blue glow rippled along the Invictus's hull. It wasn't the angry flare of charging weapons or the shimmer of shields. It was almost beautiful. "What are they?" Varric started. The Invictus fired. There was no beam, no projectile, no explosion. Just a ripple in space, like a stone dropped in a pond. The lead Trenton battleship, the Pride of Christi, simply split. One moment it was whole, the next it was 2 perfect halves, edges gleaming like polished mirror. No debris, no explosion, no screaming crew members sucked into space. Just silence. Varric's mouth went dry. The Pride of Christi had been 3,000 feet of the strongest alloys known to the Council, and the humans had cut it like paper. "Get us out of here," Varric screamed, his usual composure shattered. "All ships retreat. Retreat." But the Invictus just sat there, that soft blue glow fading, making no move to pursue. Somehow, that was even more terrifying. As the Council's fleet fled in terror, the Invictus remained motionless in the void, its very existence a declaration of superiority. The humans had sent their message, and now the Council had to decide its next move. Through the burning wreckage of the shattered Trenton battleship, Varric stared in horror at the Invictus. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a telling sign of fear among his species. "All ships, retreat! Full power to engines!" he screamed into the comm. The remaining Council vessels turned sharply, their engines flaring bright as they fled. Emergency klaxons blared throughout Varric's ship as damage reports flooded in from the surviving fleet. "Chancellor," his aide's voice shook, "the human vessel, it's not pursuing." On the main display, the Invictus hung motionless against the starfield. Its massive form seemed to mock them, as if saying it didn't even need to give chase. A transmission cut through their comms, broadcasting on all frequencies. A human voice, calm and measured, filled the bridge. "Chancellor Varric, this is Admiral Jackson of the TDS Invictus. You came here seeking to intimidate us. Instead, you've learned what happens when you threaten human space. We could destroy your entire fleet, but we're letting you go. Tell the Council what you witnessed today. Tell them that humanity stands ready to defend itself, and that next time, we won't be so merciful." Varric's hands trembled as he gripped his command chair. The casual display of power, the sheer technological gap between their civilizations, it was overwhelming. One shot had torn through their strongest warship like it was nothing. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, voice barely a whisper. "Scans indicate their weapons are still powered down. They weren't even at full combat readiness when they destroyed the battleship." The implications hit Varric like a physical blow. The humans hadn't even needed to try. They'd swatted aside the Council's military might as if dealing with children playing at war. As his fleet limped away from the system, Varric knew the balance of power had shifted forever. The Council wasn't facing some upstart species that needed to be put in its place. They had awakened something far more dangerous, a civilization that had surpassed them in ways they hadn't thought possible. "Plot a course back to Council space," he ordered quietly, "and prepare my report. The Council needs to know exactly what we're dealing with." The stars stretched into streaks as they jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving behind the human system and their illusions of superiority. Back in Council space, the retreating fleets barely had time to recount their horror before strategist Xylan presented a bold new plan. Humanity had proven itself formidable, but numbers, he believed, would always decide the victor. In the Council's war room, strategist Xylan paced before the holographic display. His long fingers danced across the data streams, pulling up battle statistics and fleet movements. "The data is clear," he said, his voice cold and measured. "One human vessel, no matter how powerful, cannot defend their entire territory. Their technological advantage is meaningless against our numbers." The Council members shifted uneasily in their seats. The memory of the Invictus's display of power was still fresh in their minds. "But strategist," a Mezan elder spoke up, her crystalline form catching the light. "We've lost every engagement so far. The costs dash." "Are acceptable," Xylan cut in. "Look at the numbers." He pulled up a new display showing the Council's total fleet strength. "We have over 10,000 ships. The humans cannot have more than a handful of vessels like the Invictus. Simple math tells us they must fall." Chancellor Varric, still shaken from his encounter, raised his hand. "You weren't there, strategist. You didn't see what that ship did to our strongest battleship." "Exactly why we must strike now," Xylan insisted, bringing up a map of human space. "Their territory is vast. They cannot protect it all. We attack everywhere at once. For every Invictus-class ship they have, we send 100 vessels. For every system they defend, we strike at 3 others." The war room erupted in murmurs as Xylan continued. "Humans are not logical. They do not follow statistical patterns. This is why our previous strategies failed. But even their unpredictability cannot overcome basic mathematics." "And what of the casualties?" another Council member asked. "High," Xylan admitted without emotion. "Perhaps 40% losses, but victory is assured if we commit fully." His fingers traced paths across the star map. "We hit every human world simultaneously, overwhelm their defenses through sheer numbers. They cannot be everywhere at once." The Council members looked at each other, their various alien features showing signs of worry and doubt. But Xylan could see the logic of his argument taking hold. "The alternative," he pressed, "is to admit defeat. To show the galaxy that the Council bows to a single human ship. How long before others challenge our authority? How long before everything we built crumbles?" The High Chancellor rose, his ancient form towering over the others. "Strategist Xylan has never failed us before. If he says this is the path to victory, then we must take it." One by one, the Council members nodded their agreement. Even Varric, though his hands still shook slightly. "Send the orders," the High Chancellor commanded. "All fleets are to mobilize. Every combat-capable ship, every reserve unit. We will show these humans the true meaning of war." Xylan allowed himself a small smile as the orders went out. Across Council space, thousands of ships began powering up their engines. The largest fleet in galactic history was about to move. The numbers didn't lie. They couldn't lie. Humanity would fall before the Council's might, or his name wasn't strategist Xylan. When the Grand Fleet finally arrived at the edge of Sol, the silence was unsettling. No planetary defenses activated. No immediate response. And then, like shadows pulling away from the darkness, the human fleet revealed itself. The massive Council fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, 5,000 warships strong, It was the largest armada ever assembled in known space. Dreadnoughts, carriers, and battlecruisers stretched as far as sensors could detect. Admiral Crintal stood on his flagship's bridge, mandibles twitching with anticipation. "Status report," he barked. "All ships accounted for, Admiral." "No human vessels detected yet," his sensor officer replied. Crintal's inner eyelids blinked rapidly. Something felt wrong. The humans should have detected them by now. Where was their response? "Sir, energy spike," the sensor officer shouted. It's everywhere." Suddenly, the void around them lit up like a newborn star. Hundreds, then thousands of human vessels materialized from seemingly nowhere. They had been there all along, hidden by technology the Council had never seen before. The human ships moved with impossible speed and coordination. They didn't just surround the Council fleet. They were already between their formation, breaking up their carefully planned attack groups. "Impossible," Crintal whispered. "There's 3 times as many ships as we brought." The TDS Invictus appeared directly in front of his flagship, its massive form dwarfing even the largest Council vessels. Behind it, waves of smaller human ships darted between Council vessels like schools of predatory fish. "Sir, they're everywhere. Our formations are completely compromised," his tactical officer yelled. Before Crintal could respond, the Invictus fired a single shot. A nearby dreadnought, the pride of the Trenton fleet, simply ceased to exist, replaced by expanding debris. "All ships retreat. Emergency jump." Crintal screamed into the fleet-wide channel. "Get us out of here." The Council fleet scattered in panic, ships jumping to hyperspace in desperate attempts to escape. The humans didn't pursue. They didn't need to. The message had been sent. As his flagship prepared for emergency jump, Crintal watched the Invictus hanging in space, its presence alone more terrifying than any weapon. They had brought their entire fleet to crush humanity. Instead, they'd barely lasted 5 minutes. The first step was Kalara Prime, a critical stronghold. As human forces landed with precise efficiency, the Council forces on the ground quickly realized they were not facing an invasion. They were witnessing a dismantling. The massive Terran fleet emerged from hyperspace above Kalara Prime, a bustling Trenton trading hub. The TDS Invictus led the charge, its gleaming hull casting long shadows across the planet's rings. Admiral Jackson stood on the bridge, her weathered face reflected in the reinforced viewscreen. "Status report." "Orbital defenses are minimal, Admiral. They never expected us to strike this deep into their territory," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his fingers dancing across the holographic display. "Of course they didn't," Jackson said with a slight smile. "They thought we'd cower in our system after their failed invasion. Time to show them how humans fight back." The Invictus's forward batteries lit up the void, systematically dismantling the orbital defense platforms. The few Trenton ships in orbit scattered like leaves in a storm. Below, in the ship's massive deployment bay, Major Alice Williams addressed her Marines. 500 men and women stood at attention, their powered armor humming with barely contained energy. "Listen up," Williams's voice echoed through the bay. "This isn't just about revenge. This is about showing the Council that humans aren't their punching bag. We're taking this world as a forward operating base, and we're doing it clean and quick." Private James Cooper checked his rifle one last time. The weight of the weapon felt reassuring in his hands. Around him, his fellow Marines performed their final equipment checks, their movements precise and practiced. 30 seconds to deployment." The overhead speakers crackled. The drop pods gleamed under the harsh bay lights. Cooper climbed into his, heart pounding, but hands steady. The pod's interior was cramped but familiar, like a metal cocoon. "Remember your training," Williams' voice came through their comms. "We're not here to destroy. We're here to occupy. Minimal civilian casualties. Show them what human discipline looks like." The bay doors opened, revealing Kalara Prime's purple-tinted atmosphere below. One by one, the pods launched, streaking through space like artificial meteors. Cooper's pod shuddered as it hit the atmosphere. Through the small viewport, he watched the planet's surface rush up to meet him. The pod's heat shields glowed cherry red, and warning lights flashed across his helmet's heads-up display. The first pods touched down in the capital city's central plaza. Their doors blew open with controlled explosions, and Marines poured out, weapons ready. The Trenton civilians, tall and imposing but completely unprepared for war on their homeworld, froze in shock. Cooper's pod landed moments later. He emerged into chaos, but it was controlled chaos. The Marines moved with purpose, securing key positions with textbook precision. Their powered armor made them tower over even the naturally tall Trenton. Section 3, secure. Section 5, clear. Government district locked down. The reports flooded the command channel as more pods continued to rain from the sky. Within minutes, the Marines had secured a 10-block radius without firing a single shot. Major Williams's voice cut through the chatter. First wave successful. Begin phase 2. Remember, we're here to show them our strength, not our cruelty. Cooper watched as a group of Trenton civilians huddled behind a decorative fountain. Their 4 eyes were wide with fear, but that fear turned to confusion as the Marines simply established a perimeter instead of attacking them. This is how we do it, Cooper muttered to himself, maintaining his position. This is how humans wage war. The sound of more drop pods filled the air as the second wave began their descent. The first human boots had landed on a Trenton world, and they had done it without a single casualty. In orbit, Admiral Jackson watched the operation unfold on her tactical display. "Send word to command," she ordered. "Kalara Prime is secured. The counter-invasion has begun." The battle should have lasted for days. Instead, within hours, it was clear. The humans didn't fight wars. They erased the very foundations of their enemy's ability to wage them. Below, in the ship's massive deployment bay, Major Emma Torres watched her Marines gear up. The drop pods gleamed under the harsh lighting, each one ready to deliver highly trained soldiers to the surface. "Listen up," Torres's voice carried across the bay. "We're making history today. First boots on their soil. Make it count." The Marines nodded, their faces set with determination. They'd trained for this moment, rehearsed every possible scenario. Now it was time to put that training to use. "Drop in 30 seconds. The announcement echoed through the bay. Torres climbed into her pod, checking the seals one last time. The interior screens lit up, showing the planet's surface below. Kalara Prime's capital city sprawled across the landscape, its spires reaching toward the stars. "Drop in 10, 9, 8. Through the command channel, Torres heard the frantic communications of the Trenton forces below. "They're everywhere. How did they breach our defenses so quickly? Call for reinforcements. The Council fleet is 3 days out at best. 3, 2, 1, drop." The pods launched, streaking through the atmosphere like artificial meteors. Ground-based weapons tried to track them, but the pods' defense systems easily deflected the incoming fire. Torres felt the familiar gut punch of re-entry. Her pod's stabilizers kicked in, guiding it toward the designated landing zone, the government district. The pod crashed through the ornate glass roof of the Planetary Administration building. As soon as the door blew open, Torres was moving, her rifle up and ready. Her team secured the immediate area while more pods landed around them. "Command, this is Ground Team Alpha. We've secured the initial landing zone," Torres reported. Above, the Invictus continued its methodical dismantling of Kalara Prime's defenses. Any Trenton ships that tried to launch were quickly disabled or destroyed. "The Council's response fleet is scattered across 3 sectors. Admiral Jackson's voice came through the communication. "They can't mount an effective counterattack. You have a clear window to secure the capital." Torres led her team through the building's corridors. The few Trenton security forces they encountered quickly surrendered, clearly unprepared for close-quarter combat with human Marines. Within hours, the planetary governor's office was secured. The governor, a tall Trenton with deep blue scales, sat behind his desk, trying to maintain his dignity as Torres approached. Your defense forces have been neutralized, Torres stated firmly. Your orbital platforms are destroyed. Your reinforcements won't arrive in time. Do you wish to continue this fight? The governor looked at the human soldiers, then at the screens showing the Invictus hanging in orbit like an armored angel of death. His shoulders slumped. No, he said quietly. Kalara Prime surrenders. Torres nodded, then activated her comm. Command, this is Ground Team Alpha. The planet is ours. The first Council world had fallen to humanity, and it had taken less than a day. With every world that fell, the Council's grip weakened. And when humanity finally set its sights on the heart of the Council itself, even Chancellor Varric could see the inevitable. Warlord Christie stood before the shattered remains of what had once been the pride of the Trenton fleet. His claws dug into his palms as he watched the recordings again. The human ships didn't fight with honor. They struck from the shadows, used deception, and attacked with overwhelming force. Impossible, he growled, mandibles clicking in agitation. They were supposed to be primitive, weak. His aide, a younger Trenton named Zelerin, approached cautiously. My lord, we've analyzed their attack patterns. They don't follow any of the ancient combat codes. Christie's inner eyelids flickered as he studied the tactical displays. The humans had used their smaller ships as bait, drawing his proud warriors into carefully planned killing zones. When his fleet had formed the ceremonial spear formation, a formation that had struck fear into enemies for generations, the humans had simply ignored it completely. They'd attacked from multiple vectors simultaneously, caring nothing for the dishonor of striking an opponent's back. Their weapons had torn through shields that should have held. Their ships had appeared and disappeared at will, using some kind of technology that bent space itself. My lord, Zelerin said, his voice trembling. There's more. The aide pulled up new data streams. Reports flooded in from across Council space. Human forces were everywhere, striking with precision and ruthless efficiency. They didn't attempt to hold territory or engage in proper fleet battles. They simply destroyed anything of military value and vanished. Christie's hearts began to race as he saw the pattern. The humans weren't fighting a war of honor or conquest. They were systematically dismantling the Council's ability to wage war. They're not even trying to defeat us in battle, he whispered. They're destroying our shipyards, my lord. Our fuel refineries, our ammunition factories, our supply lines. Zelerin's voice cracked. Reports indicate they've already reduced our military-industrial capacity by 60%. Christie sank into his command throne, his proud warrior's posture crumbling. The humans had never intended to fight the Council on equal terms. They'd simply calculated the fastest way to win, honor be damned. The Council, he began, has already lost. Zelerin finished quietly. We just haven't admitted it yet. Christie stared at the tactical displays, watching as more red indicators winked out across Council space. The humans were like a virus, spreading everywhere at once, impossible to contain. They didn't care about glory or tradition or the proper ways of warfare. They just wanted to win. And they were winning. The proud warlord felt something he hadn't experienced since he was a hatchling. Fear. Not of death in battle, which was glorious, but of something far worse. Complete and utter defeat, without even the chance to die honorably. The humans had changed the rules of war itself, and the Council hadn't even realized it until it was too late. The war was over, but the Council refused to admit it. In their grand chamber, once a beacon of unity, the last fragments of power fought among themselves, unaware that humanity had already moved on. The ground shook as Terran dropships pierced the atmosphere of Nexus Prime, the Council's crown jewel. Chancellor Varric watched from his office window as the massive vessels descended like dark angels of death, their hulls gleaming in the pale morning light. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of his desk. The marble surface, imported from the finest quarries in the galaxy, felt cold under his fingers. This cannot be happening, he whispered. The first pods hit the ground with thunderous impacts. The streets of the capital, usually filled with delegates from 100 worlds, were empty, except for the emergency response teams. Sirens wailed across the city. Varric's personal communicator buzzed. "Chancellor, they've breached the outer defense ring. Our forces. They're not even slowing them down." Through the window, he could see the Terran Marines advancing. Their powered armor made them look like giants, each step leaving small craters in the ornate streets. The Council's security forces fired energy weapons at them, but the shots seemed to dissolve harmlessly against their shields. "Fall back! Fall back!" Someone screamed over the general channel. The sound of weapons fire grew closer. Varric rushed to his emergency terminal, his perfectly manicured fingers flying over the controls. "This is Chancellor Varric of the Galactic Council. I formally request an audience with the human leadership. We wish to discuss terms." The response came quickly, but not in the form he expected. The massive doors to his chamber burst open. 2 Terran Marines entered, their armor covered in the dust of battle. Their faceplates were black and emotionless. "Please," Varric said, raising his hands, "we can negotiate. The Council has vast resources. We can offer dash." "Silence," one of the Marines commanded. His voice was filtered through external speakers, making it sound even more inhuman. "The time for negotiations ended when you sent your fleet to Earth." "But surely we can." "Chancellor Varric," the other Marine interrupted. "You are hereby detained under the authority of the United Human Federation. Your negotiations will be with a war crimes tribunal." Varric's legs gave out and he slumped into his chair. Outside, more dropships were landing. The proud spires of the Council capital were now dwarfed by the massive human warships hovering above them. "Please," he tried one last time, his voice cracking. "We can still find a peaceful solution." The Marines stepped forward, their heavy boots leaving marks on the priceless carpet. One of them produced restraints. "That option died with the billions you sacrificed trying to appease us," the Marine replied coldly. "The Council's time is over. Humanity is not here to negotiate." But no amount of bickering could change reality. When the last stronghold surrendered, when the final fleet powered down their weapons, the war came to its inevitable end. The Grand Council chamber, once a symbol of unity, had devolved into chaos. Species that had stood together for centuries now hurled accusations across the ornate hall. "The Trenton brought this upon us," screamed Ambassador Lix of the Meridians, his crystalline form flashing with rage. "Their warmongering pushed the humans too far." Warlord Christie rose to his full height, his massive frame casting a shadow over the chamber. "We defended your worlds while you cowered behind treaties," he roared, slamming his fist on the podium. The impact cracked the ancient wood. Chancellor Varric watched helplessly as millennia of alliance crumbled before his eyes. The Zelaxians had already withdrawn their forces, leaving their defense stations unmanned. The Meridians were pulling their trade ships from Trenton space, dooming millions to resource shortages. "The humans are at our doorstep," Varric pleaded, "and you choose now to fight among yourselves?" But his words fell on deaf ears. The Quantum Alliance, once their strongest supporters, had already signed a separate peace treaty with Earth. The Jovians followed suit within hours. On the primary view screen, reports streamed in of Trenton colonies falling one by one. The humans' tactics were ruthless in their efficiency. They didn't waste time with prolonged sieges or honorable challenges. They simply appeared, struck with overwhelming force, and moved on to the next target. Christie watched the tactical display with growing horror. His people's proud warships, once the terror of the galaxy, were being swatted aside like insects. The humans had somehow perfected weapons that ignored their strongest shields, cutting through their finest armor like paper. "Enough," Christie said quietly, silencing the chamber. "We have lost." The admission seemed to physically pain him, his proud shoulders sagging under the weight of defeat. He turned to face the human hologram that had been silently observing the proceedings. The Trenton Empire. He swallowed hard, centuries of pride dying in his throat. The Trenton Empire surrenders to humanity, unconditionally. The human representative nodded once, their expression neutral. They had known this moment would come. They had planned for it, expected it, and now they accepted it without gloating or ceremony. That perhaps was the most terrifying thing of all. Humanity did not seek conquest, but they had earned dominion. As the council fell apart, the foundations of a new order were already being laid. The final council stronghold on Nexus Prime shuddered under the relentless assault. Admiral James Cooper stood on the bridge of the TDS Invictus, watching as human forces systematically dismantled the last remnants of council resistance. "They're dropping their shields, sir," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "All defense platforms are powering down." Cooper nodded, his weathered face reflecting the blue glow of the holographic displays. Below them, the massive Citadel, a structure that had housed the Council's military command for over 3 centuries, began raising white flags. "Open a channel," Cooper ordered. His voice was steady, but carried the weight of 4 years of brutal warfare. The main screen flickered to life, showing the defeated face of Supreme Commander Ixtal. The alien's scaled skin had lost its usual luster, and his ceremonial armor was covered in dust from the partially collapsed chamber around him. "The Council's military forces," Ixtal's translator crackled with static, "hereby surrender unconditionally to the United Human Federation." Cooper's response was measured. "Your surrender is accepted. Prepare to receive our peacekeeping forces." Within hours, Terran Marines secured the Citadel. Captain Maria Santos led her squad through the grand corridors, past ancient artworks and sophisticated technology that had once represented the peak of Council achievement. Now they were simply spoils of war. In the Central Command Center, Santos found dozens of data crystals, the complete military archives of the Council. She activated her comm. "Command, we've secured their intelligence center. You're not going to believe what we found." Above the planet, more human ships arrived through FTL, their hulls bearing the scars of previous battles. The fleet assembled in formation, a show of force that was now more ceremony than necessity. Admiral Cooper stepped onto the ceremonial platform in the Citadel's Great Hall. Before him stood the remaining Council military leaders, once proud warriors who had sneered at humanity's primitive ways. Now they stood in silence as Cooper read from a datapad. "By the authority of the United Human Federation, I hereby declare the complete and total victory of humanity over the Council forces. All Council military assets are now under UHF control. All Council territories are now under UHF protection." The words echoed through the vast chamber. Ixtal and his fellow commanders bowed their heads in acknowledgement. Their mighty empire, built over thousands of years, had fallen in less than half a decade to a species they had dismissed as barely spacefaring. From Earth, President Reyes addressed the human colonies and newly surrendered Council worlds. Her holographic image was broadcast across thousands of planets. Today marks not just a victory, but a turning point in galactic history. Humanity stood against extinction and emerged triumphant. But we do not seek to rule through fear as the Council did. We offer a hand of friendship to all species who will join us in building a better future. The message played in every language on every world. In the Council Citadel, Cooper watched the alien commanders' reactions. Some showed fear, others relief, but most displayed something he hadn't expected: hope. A young Marine raised the UHF flag above the Citadel. Its stars and stripes, modified to represent all human colonies, caught the light of the system's twin suns. Below it, the Council's ancient banner was respectfully lowered for the last time. Humanity had won, not through overwhelming force alone, but through innovation, adaptability, and an unwavering determination that had shocked the galaxy. The species that had been dismissed as primitive now stood as the dominant force in known space. The war was over. Humanity's victory was complete. And yet, even in victory, humanity was faced with a different kind of plea. The war had displaced billions, and among them were those who had never wished to fight in the first place. Inside the grand chamber that once housed the Galactic Council, Admiral Cooper stood before representatives of 100 worlds. The marble-like walls, etched with the histories of 1,000 species, now bore witness to humanity's ascension. "The old order is finished," Cooper declared, his voice carrying through the vast hall. "Today marks the beginning of the Terran Dominion." The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some wore expressions of defeat, others of quiet acceptance. A Trenton elder, his battle-scarred face a testament to their species' warrior heritage, spoke up. "And what guarantees do we have that humanity will be better rulers than the Council?" Cooper smiled, not unkindly. "We don't seek to rule. We seek to lead. Every world that joins the Dominion will have a voice. But make no mistake, we will not tolerate the corruption and prejudice that plagued the old Council." From her seat, former Chancellor Varric watched with a mix of horror and fascination. The humans had done the unthinkable, not just defeating the Council, but dismantling it entirely. "The articles of the Terran Dominion are simple," Cooper continued, activating a holographic display. "Each member world maintains its sovereignty. Trade routes will be protected. Technology will be shared. And most importantly, any act of aggression against a member world will be met with the full force of the Dominion fleet." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Saurian representative, his scaled skin reflecting the chamber's light, raised a clawed hand. "And those who refuse to join?" "Are free to do so," Cooper replied, "but they will not enjoy the benefits of Dominion membership or protection." One by one, the representatives began signing the articles. The Trenton were first, their warrior pride giving way to pragmatism. The Saurians followed, then the Zentari. Even Varric, representing what remained of the old Council worlds, stepped forward to sign. As the last signature was recorded, Cooper pressed a button on the podium. The ancient Council seal, which had hung above the chamber for millennia, powered down for the final time. In its place, the emblem of the Terran Dominion, a stylized Earth surrounded by stars, blazed to life. "Let the record show," Cooper announced, "that on this day the Galactic Council ceased to exist. In its place we build something better, something stronger, something united." The chamber erupted in applause, some genuine, some merely diplomatic. But as the sound echoed through the ancient halls, one truth was undeniable. Humanity had not just won a war, they had reshaped the galaxy. Varric watched as her former chambers were already being converted into offices for the new Dominion administration. Guards in Terran marine armor stood where Council peacekeepers once patrolled. The change was swift, efficient, and absolute. "It's really over, isn't it?" she asked Cooper as he passed her seat. He paused, looking at the former Chancellor with something approaching sympathy. "The Council is over," he agreed. "But the galaxy's story is just beginning." Above them, the new Dominion seal continued to shine, a testament to humanity's rise and the Council's fall. In less than a standard solar cycle, the political structure that had governed the galaxy for thousands of years had been completely dismantled, replaced by something entirely new. The Terran Dominion was born, and the Galactic Council was no more. And yet, even in victory, humanity was faced with a different kind of plea. The war had displaced billions, and among them were those who had never wished to fight in the first place. Commander Alexander Kane stood aboard the TDS Invictus, watching the stars as a desperate plea for sanctuary played on the holographic display. Representatives of the Nilari, Voth, and Zentari, former minor voices in the now-defeated Council, looked weary, their pride replaced by desperation. "We were never part of the Council's aggression," the Nilari elder pleaded. "Our people are refugees. We seek the Dominion's protection." Kane's history with alien aggression made him hesitate. Yet, His first officer confirmed their claims. These species had opposed the war, and even tried to warn humanity. "You benefited from the Council's power," Kane stated, but the Zentari admitted their shame. Is not mercy one of humanity's greatest strengths? The weight of 3 billion displaced lives hung in the balance. Kane closed his eyes, recalling past horrors, then the moments of unexpected kindness. Humanity had proven its strength in war. Now it had the chance to prove its wisdom. Decision made, he turned to the refugees. The decision to accept the refugees was more than an act of mercy, it was a statement. As the Terran flag rose above the fallen council chambers, it was clear that the galaxy no longer belonged to the old order. On Centrax Prime, the Terran flag rose over the former council chambers as Admiral Helena Torres stood among Earth's military and diplomatic leaders. The council, once dismissive of humanity, had fallen. Now their grand halls bore the scars of final battle, their symbol of unity repurposed as a flagpole for humanity's dominance. Below, crowds of defeated species watched in silence as a proclamation echoed through the plaza. By order of the Terran High Command, humanity claims sovereignty over all former Council territories. Those who accept Terran rule will be granted autonomy. Those who resist will be deemed hostile. No protests rose, only quiet acceptance. The war had proven humanity's resolve. Torres addressed her officers. "We never sought this war, but when pushed, we fought and won. The stars now belong to us." As Terran fighters soared across the sky, the Terran flag waved in the twilight, a symbol of a new era. The Council's rule was over. The age of humanity had begun. If you enjoyed the story of Olivia, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.